handout is just a story that we shared, just one page, and you might want to read it. No, that wasn't it. Who else? Some down there. Fred. How you doing? It's a true story. Well, I ran out. Didn't make it. Is there any extras?
Yes.
Write it down.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody will make it better.
Alrighty, that's a story that we told last week. You didn't miss a whole lot, so we'll kind of into this a little bit. Does anybody have any updates on prayer concerns for folks in our church family who need prayer? We want to continue to remember Beverly and Peggy, Evelyn, Susan, Don, and Jim. Anybody else? Alright, just some things that are coming up. Leaf Man is coming Saturday. Meet here at 8:30 if you want to meet the Leaf Man.
Be the leaf man.
Be the Leaf Man too. You can meet him, know him, become like him. We're starting to get geared up for the winter shelter. You'll see the winter shelter, the weeks that we haven't, January and February, they'll be in the bulletin. They were in the email that went out today. So there'll be an information meeting in early January for that. Hey, December 15th at 5 o'clock, we're going to have kind of a church Christmas gathering. So bring your favorite Christmas finger food. We'll be in the gym. We have got some of our artists that are going to come, our musical artists that are going to come and offer some Christmas entertainment. Cool. So looking forward to that. So come and be a part of that, and then we're going to move from the gym into the auditorium candlelight service. So that's December the 15th. Want to remind you that. Sunday we'll resume. We're going to go back to our regular classes on the book of Jonah. So that'll start Sunday morning. Next week there's not going to be any service here, just because that's a Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so we won't have any classes or anything like that. And because there's no service here, there won't be any supper either. So
That's a shame.
knocking on the gym door, nobody's answering. You know why. It's not because they don't like you or don't want to let you in. There's nobody here.
So we come to your house for dinner?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have the same experience at my house too. Knocking on the door, nobody will be answering. All righty. Anything else? Laney, how you doing tonight?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good. Missed you last Thursday. Chili dogs. You missed chili dogs. All right. And this is a reading from Psalm 103. And we'll start with this. But if you could just sort of imagine not just that you're in this classroom with each other, but you've come here to be with our God too. That you've come into the presence of God. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfies your mouth with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in mercy. He will not always accuse, neither will he keep his anger forever. He does not treat us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so great is his mercy towards those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. Like a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord gives compassion to those who fear him. For he knows how we are formed. He remembers that we are dust. As for us, our days are like grass. As a flower of the field flourishes, then the hot wind passes over it, and it's gone. The place where it was is not even known. But the mercy of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting for those who fear him, to those who keep his covenant, to those who remember his commands. The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all kingdoms. Bless the Lord, you his angels who are mighty and do his commands and obey the voice of his word. Bless the Lord, all you hosts, you servants who do his pleasure. Bless the Lord, all his works, in all places, all of it his dominion. Bless the Lord, O my soul. It's a wonderful psalm to me. Pray that you hear that blessing. All right, so if you missed last week, we are going to take some journeys into the book of Revelation. We're not going to do it sequentially at all. We're going to kind of go in and come back out and go in and come back out. We're going to do it in different places. We'll be in chapter 1 tonight, but that's just because that's what worked out well for tonight. We want to sort of step in to the world that Revelation describes, and then from that world look back at our own world and try to see it as John would have us to see it. So what I'd like to do, man, how did I get in here without my Bible? I was carrying a lot of stuff. So what I would like to do is start with Revelation and a vision that John has. So if somebody got a loud voice they can read, we're going to be in chapter 1. Anybody
I'd be happy to read.
Would you, Greg?
Sure.
I don't know exactly what verse the vision starts. Maybe 4, 5, 6, 7.
Where it says John's vision of Christ, I think that's 9.
9, and read through 20, please.
Sure. I, John, your brother and companion, in the suffering and kingdom and patient endurance that are ours in Jesus, was on the island of Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. On the Lord's day I was in the Spirit, and I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet, which said, "Write on a scroll what you see, and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea." I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me, and when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and among the lampstands was someone like a son of man, dressed in a robe reached down to his feet, and with a golden sash around his chest. The hair on his head was white like wool, as white as snow. His eyes were like blazing fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and coming out of his mouth was a sharp double-edged sword. His face was like the sun, shining in all its brilliance. How far do you want me to go?
Keep going until
Okay.
that vision ends. Yeah.
When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever. And I hold the keys of death and Hades. Write, therefore, what you have seen, what is now, and what will take place later. The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand," I gotta flip page, "and the 7 golden lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches."
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, so, we're gonna take these journeys into Revelation, and we're not, I don't really want us to be in analytical mode. I want us to be in story mode. I want us to sort of experience this book, in the way that the early readers would have experienced it as they are receiving it from John, as he's talking about this. So, you just, John has this vision, and this vision is about, I mean, you're familiar with this character, right? I mean, you get hints of who this is, and it's quite an awe-inspiring vision, isn't it? Now, if you read the handout, or if you remember from last week, you also had another story and another vision of Tiridates going to Rome and worshiping the god Nero. And so here you have a vision of Jesus, who appears as a startling figure, and John falling before him. So John is writing a book. He's writing this letter to these 7 churches, and he really expects that things are going to get tougher and tougher, that they're going to face trouble. Somebody look at chapter 2 and verse 13. Jenny, would you mind reading that for me? Just one verse, 2:13.
2:13.
Yeah.
I know where you live, where Satan has his throne, yet you remain true to my name. You did not renounce your faith in me, even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city, where Satan lives.
Okay, so one of the churches, that's actually in Pergamon, I think. And Gray, I may pronounce these different from you. The key is just to say them with a lot of confidence and real fast, because you could be right. Like I don't know either. But so there's already been somebody that's lost their life because of their faith in Pergamon, and John expects that things are going to get a lot worse. This group of churches is all in Asia Minor. In fact, I started on this because this is where we finished last week. So this is Nero, and of course you can see Nero, Caesar, Augustus, right, the mighty one. And on the back of his coin, these are the doors to the temple of Janus, the god of war. And what Nero is saying is, and he minted these right after Tiridates, the Parthian king, came to him and made peace. He's saying, I am the one that closes the doors of war. And now everything's at peace. And there's some divinity language about himself on this coin. So this is a conflict that we talked about last week. It's a conflict between a world in which you look up and Rome is all there is and all it seems that there will ever be. And we're, in order to get along and survive in this world, you have to bow the knee to the god Caesar. And yet, Gray just read us another world. A world behind the veil, the real world. where there is another king who holds the keys to the door himself. And this is another allegiance. It's a whole other way of looking. And so what we're going to see is in Revelation, rather than taking all these numbers and these symbols and just kind of trying to go through some like you engineers would love to analyze this and break everything down. But what we're going to see is we're going to see John contrasting the world of Christ in his reign with the world that the Christians are living in. He will actually, by his language and his symbols, he will lampoon the arrogance of the Romans. And that's a lot of what his vision is about. And we'll look at that. We talked about symbols last week, and so this was 2:13. You didn't even have to read that, Jenny. I had it down here. So here's these here's these 7 churches and where they're located. And we talked about how even though they're not in Rome, even though they're now in what is sort of Western Turkey, these are the people that were sort of right there. They weren't in Asia quite. They were almost right there at the edge of Asia and almost in Europe. But these were the people that wanted to suck up to the emperor the most. These were the people that, if they could show extreme loyalty and devotion to Caesar, then they could reap the benefits. Reap the benefits of his favor and his legions and his protection and the economic opportunities that presented. So this is the area that's facing all the difficulty. Jenny read about the death in Pergamon. So what these guys did in their world that these Christians are living in is this is really where emperor worship started. And the first temples that deified the Roman emperors were built in this area. And the first official institution or organization that tried to go around and demand that people worship the emperor happened right here in Pergamum. And what did John call that? He said, where Satan has his throne. Who was put to death in your city where Satan lives. So you're seeing how the lines are drawn. We talked also about the importance of symbols and how we use symbols. And there's kind of I can't remember the guy that did CT. Just talked about the way that kind of symbol theory works in civilization. First you have icons. And icons have some resemblance to the message you're trying to communicate. So there you see, you know what this means, right? And what this means coming up is something that sort of very much looks like what you see on the sign. And then there's indexes that are symbols. So if I show you this, what would you say? How would you verbally express that? Curvy road. And then Fred said slow down. So it's got multiple meanings, right? There's depth to the meanings. And then when I just say yell out a word, and you see this. Temperature, okay?
Hot.
But that's not temperature, and that's not hot. What is it? That's a thermometer. But it's an index, so sometimes symbols don't exactly resemble what's coming up, but sometimes they're a measure of the idea behind it. A measure of heat, right? And a lot of you said hot because it's all the way up. If it had been blue and low, you all said cold. And then we have outright symbols. And these symbols work because you're familiar with the culture. Now, if you showed this to somebody that lived in the 1800s in Brazil, they'd say, "Oh, that's an elephant and a donkey. I have no idea why they're colored like that. They got stars on them." But you guys know what that is, right? And the way that you learned what this symbol meant, I don't know. You know, maybe you said, "Hey, Dad, when you were young, what does that elephant mean?" And he said, "Well, he told you about the Republican Party somehow." But most likely, you have come to learn what these symbols meant because you've been watching the news and reading the paper and seeing all kinds of propaganda about what the leaders of these parties would do. So over time, it's become contextualized for you and enculturated with you. So icons have recognizable similarity. Indexes is when there's an effect or a change by reference to something. And then symbols have agreed arbitrary meaning. Yeah, I mean, what does a Republican really have to do with an elephant? I mean, I don't understand that. I'm not going to go the other way because some of y'all are going to be mean. So in this reading, you saw evidences of all three of those. If you think about it, you had an icon in John's vision. It was the exalted Christ. Now, we don't think that that's actually what Jesus looked like. But the icon of this exalted, resurrected one with the blazing eyes and the white clothes and everything, it's similar to what the King of Kings would look like. Did you notice an index in the reading? Was there a measurement? I thought about the fact that John falls at his feet before this resurrected one, this Lord. So that's what, when you bow, you prostrate yourself. That's sort of an index, right? It's a measurement of being before a ruler, right? It's almost like a thermostat, right? And then we had symbols in that vision. Like when somebody's holding the keys, that says something, doesn't it? That symbolizes something. All right, let's see if I can do this without totally messing up here. My wife is using my computer tonight and the kids, and so I'm struggling here. All right, let's just try it this one. We also saw that there was a familiar title if you're sort of if you're familiar with the Jesus story, when you saw the resurrected one, the one who is dead and alive. I mean, all of you know that story, so you thought of Jesus. There's that title of the Son of Man. Let's see if this works real quick. Yeah. The Son of Man is a familiar title that comes out of Daniel. So John is pulling from symbols and information that his people would know. You think about resurrected one. This we think that this kind of terror reign of emperor worship may have started around 66, 68 A.D. By this time, James, Peter, and Paul have all met violent deaths, probably being caught up in some of this stuff. So the idea that he refers to this one as a resurrected one becomes really important. And the idea that Jesus holds the keys, even to Hades. We'll show you another coin. So this is again what we call propaganda, right? We see propaganda. You guys have been seeing propaganda for months, and you're hoping after the first Tuesday in November that most of that propaganda is over for a while. We'd like to see football move a little bit faster, not have these long political commercials.
Right.
So this this is a coin from Domitian's reign. And in his right hand, he's released some stars. Can anybody, one of you engineers is good at math, could you count how many stars there are?
7. I'm an engineer.
Okay, thanks, Greg. There's 7 stars. He's representing himself as the sun god Apollo. Right? As the god of the sun who holds 7 stars. Now why 7? They only knew of 5 planets at that time, so you take the 5 planets and the sun and the moon, you get 7, right? It's the idea that he controls the universe. It's all in his hand. And
What's that on his head? Has he got a mask on, or half of it's funny?
it's kind of the hat, I don't know what you call it, that Apollo wears.
Well,
He's
he's
sitting
looking
on
off
the
to the,
world.
he's looking off to the right then,
Yeah.
with a hat on, okay.
Yeah, they're minting practices. These not as pristine as a U.S. quarter. It says, you can see the DIVV and Divine Caesar, and then they would abbreviate things, but you can see the Emperor and then Dominion, D-O-M, there. Now, here's how this lampooning works, right? In his right hand he held 7 stars. This is the vision of who? This is what Gray read. It's the vision of Jesus. And coming out of his mouth was a sharp, double-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in all its brilliance. So you see how John's working? He's saying, yeah, you got this coin that everybody knows, everybody's using. The denarius is a common coin that's circulating all over Asia Minor. That coin was printed in Asia Minor. It wasn't printed in Rome. It was minted there. They had to see that every single day as a follower of Jesus. But John says, hey, look back beyond the curtain and see the world as it really is. So there's this subversion of the arrogance and the claims to power in the world.
See, Jerry, I'm just curious, what's double-edged sword? What's the relevancy of that, if you got any, like what that significance of that is?
Yeah, I think this is really important. Read that carefully. What do you make of it? What do you think is being said? So double-edged sword is definitely in the symbol realm, right? It's going to be either an icon or a symbol. Which double-edged sword is, what would that mean, do you think?
It could mean that the truth or his words can be used to destroy some people or help. It goes both ways. If you're on the side, then you're good, but if you're against, the words will cut you or kill you.
That's right.
That's
So
what I
it's-
think of.
That's right. So it can work 2 ways. It's sort of a dividing instrument, but I think it's very interesting that you picked up on that this comes out of his mouth. He's not wielding it with his hand. So this is not an encouragement to Christians to take up the sword of violence, because this is the proclamation of the gospel, which the gospel proclamation is the kingdom of God is here. And it's come with a new king. So it's a very... Now, so let me ask you. I just want to ask you. Is John's vision political or is it religious?
It could be both. It's certainly religious, maybe both.
Maybe both. False choice. Yeah. Christians have a choice. Now, the way that it looks like to so many in that world is you don't have a choice. You either bow the knee to Caesar or you lose your head. And we'll look at some letters that were written in the mid-second century that show that this really became a reality. But John says, no, you actually have another choice. The other choice is you cannot bow the knee to this man. You can throw your allegiance to Christ, and he's the one who holds the keys. So that's where John, see how he moves us into another world. And then once you get into the world the way it really is, where Jesus is the King of Kings, then you turn your view around and you look at the old world. And as you step back into that, which is the world you live in, you have to make decisions about how to live. You have to make decisions about how do I live as a believer in Pergamum? And how does my allegiance to Christ play out? So I don't know if, the word that's used of the Parthian king is proskuneo, when he kneels before, when he worships before, when he prostrates himself before Nero. That's the exact same word that's used for worship throughout Revelation. And it looks something like this. It might have been completely flat, but this is what worship is. This is what John does. He falls flat on his face. And this is what Christians could do if they were accused of following Jesus as Lord and they were brought to trial. They would immediately dismiss charges if you would proskuneo before the idol of the emperor. That's all. When you were free to go. So it was really an issue of who do you worship? Who will you bow before? And that's why Revelation is really not a book of codes, and Revelation is a book of worship. All right, any comments or thoughts about that?
I don't know, it reminds me a little bit of the story in Daniel, when Daniel wouldn't bow before the king, and he was, thrown in the lion's den for that. I mean, it's not as a grand scale or anything, but it's kind of the same principle in a way.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because that's where we need to go next. Is the title, the Son of Man, comes from Daniel 7. So sort of what John is wanting his followers to think is that this world, this battle, this choice is the same one that Daniel had. It's the same one that God's people had when they were brought to Babylon and they were told to worship the Babylonian gods.
So one scholar I read suggests that the repetition you see throughout the Bible, and you just mentioned it, basically says, and it's relevant for us today, that it's going to happen again.
Yeah, or it always happens.
Yeah, so you see that repetition, and you hit that. That's a good point.
So I think John's vision, you can see how it works if you present the world as it really is, ruled by a God with incredible power who is owed all of our reverence and all of our awe. If he is in control, if he is the one we fear, then we don't have to be afraid of anything else, right? If he is the one who deserves all awe and honor and power, if he is the one who is in control, then Nero is not. So this is the work that we have to do together, and I don't want to be a smart aleck. We had Josh, he was kind of being a smart aleck last week. I wish Josh was here. So what you have to do to contextualize this as believers who worship Christ, you have to turn towards our society. And you have to say, are there idolatrous expressions of power in our world, and maybe even our society? Now, you know, there's easy culprits, right? There's actually a ruler in North Korea that sets up images of himself and wants his people to worship him. So that's very slanderous, right? That's very blasphemous.
Jerry, wasn't Nero already dead when John wrote this?
He was dead when John wrote this. But there are three emperors.
But the persecution was continuing.
Yeah, so that he is the first one that said, oh, you guys over there in Pergamon, are you going to build temples and ask people to worship the emperors? Bring it on. That made me feel good. I like that. You know, he was the first one that embraced and encouraged that. And then Domitian. And there were periods. It wasn't like it was constantly heated. You know, when Trajan became emperor, he kind of had a don't ask, don't tell. Don't try to seek these people out. It wasn't, you know. And in fact, his people in Rome were like, you're worshiping Nero? He's a maniac. You know? Of course, nobody could say anything to his face. That's one of the reasons he got killed, right? He was such an egomaniac that the Senate got the Praetorian Guard to take him out eventually. So, where do you see if you take this allegiance we have to Jesus, where do you see that allegiance challenged in the way that we try to navigate our own lives? What sets itself up is claiming the same kind of reverence and awe and allegiance as Jesus does.
Some success.
Success. Could you think of any icons or symbols or indexes? Money. Okay.
Oscar Wilde once said that patriotism was a virtue of the vicious.
Okay.
I see Christians who are such patriots that there's things that they're willing to do that maybe I wouldn't do, that you wouldn't do.
So how do you see that manifested in terms of an icon or an index or a symbol? By the way, before we leave, Jenny, so Jesus, it was interesting that in his teaching, he talked about the worship of Satan, right, the evil one as a competitor, but he also called something else a god. That was money, right? So he also thought that was a god. So he would have agreed with you. So David, like, do you have an index or do you have a behavior or a...
Yeah, I've looked at the Christian nationalism, and I want to separate myself apart from that as far as I can get.
So what is behind that? What are you thinking?
People who think that the political America is the kingdom of God.
Sorry, Don, it's going down 1 degree. It's just getting hot here, brother.
Well, I'm kind of hot myself.
Okay, so you feel sometimes there's instances where we set up our own country as having the same authority
Well, we've seen it.
and reverence that only belongs to God and His kingdom. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else see? Again, these are ways that we try to take this world that's presented revelation, and then we try to think back about ways that this might challenge our walk, might challenge our allegiance. What other things are in demand for your allegiance, for your passion, for your proskuneo, your worship? for the best of your time, the best of your heart? What are the things have you come to believe, or does the world want you to believe is a place where salvation is found, where life is found? What does it mean to be a virtuous person in our society that runs counter to what it means to be a virtuous person in the kingdom of God? These are the kind of questions.
I think the whole issue of rights, where there's the concept that this is the highest value for mankind, and then it becomes a very self-centered sort of call.
Like individual rights and my personal freedom to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. That's huge. That's a huge value of our culture, isn't it? And that is certainly counter to the world that John believes is truly real and what's important.
And trying to stay young or youth or appear young and youthful is a big one in culture, I think, in general, and fighting, which there's nothing that I've seen Jesus talk about how it's important to look like you're an age younger than you actually are. I don't think that's ever mentioned
So
in the New Testament.
We could say that money was maybe a security thing, that God really can't provide my ultimate security. I need a good stash in the bank to be calm and confident. But what would youthful, what would be the pursuit of youth, or like what would be?
That's
behind
that's getting validation from society, approval from people rather than from God, and getting thumbs up. Like getting self-worth through other humans' eyes rather than from what's valuable to God, I think.
So an identity,
Yes.
a value,
identity.
a worth, a mattering issue. Okay. Any icons, indexes, or symbols that you would see? I mean, that related to that?
None's popping in my brain other than just a whole bunch of stuff, but it's not a singular representation of that.
Not beauty products.
Beauty products, there's so many. So, yeah. There's so many.
What was that thing that they actually has some people are using it for migraines, the Botox, right? Maybe the Botox vial or something.
I think about, this may be off the, I think about our spouses or our kids and idolizing that, those relationships, and putting all of, like if the relationship's okay or this person's doing what I want, then I feel like I'm secure and I'm safe and everything's cruising, and if it's not, then I fall apart. So I'm just thinking about, I don't know if that's,
So are you talking about finding meaning and mattering, like chiefly through?
yeah, identity, like for instance, like if I feel like Gray, I'm just using an example, I don't feel like we operate like this in real, but if I feel like, for instance, Gray is happy with me, Gray likes the way I look, he thinks I'm working really hard, our house looks good, I'm being a good mom, then I feel like I'm a good woman and I'm worthy of his love. And if I feel like he's displeased with me, then I just, go down the toilet because I can't. That's an extreme example, but so it's that kind of thing where it's like it all just hinges on, or my kids, if my kids are blowing it or struggling or they're misbehaving or they're embarrassing me, I just become unhinged because I can't just show up and know that my worth is found in something greater than that because I'm holding on so tightly to those relationships.
So when we build our self-worth, our self-esteem, and
Yeah.
when that's our project, when it,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I see that. By the way, the Richard Beck's new book, the On Joy, is Shape of Joy. It's really good. He's all over that. It's a good book. Any other icons, index symbols you see today in politics, business, professions, or even religion?
Cars.
Cars? Who said that? Fred? What you thinking there, Fred, when you say cars?
Well, a lot of people sort of worship their nice cars,
Especially if it's orange.
like I
right?
did. Just before I got out of the Navy, I bought a '56 Chevy,
Wow.
the most expensive one on the market. Paid $2,500.
But I don't want to be a total joy killer here, okay? That's not what I want to do. But, I mean, it could be, right? It could be. So I don't want to say, I mean, I do think the pursuit of beauty and innovation and creativity is a God-given thing too, right? So, yeah. So I don't want to be the total joy killer here, but, you know, I think we want to think about, I mean, there's a church on the other side of town that has like 40 American flags in its lot. And that speaks something to me. I don't know, I'm not judging, I'm just saying, it speaks something to me. And what it speaks to me is not the kingdom of God. And I'm wondering if those flags are trespassing in a way. You know, I have those thoughts. I'm like, that's kind of weird. Because those are two different things. At least that's what Revelation is saying. That even in all the structures of man, God is working and doing His will, and He's supreme and sovereign. You go to Romans and you can find a text where God has appointed authorities, right, to punish. But then that's not the whole conversation, because part of the conversation's in Revelation. Part of the conversation's in Paul, where he says, you know, there are rulers and authorities that have set themselves up against the reign of Jesus. So how do you navigate that, right? How do you live in this world? Sometimes it's so obvious, like whatever that Kim guy said. Sometimes it's so blatantly obvious.
Hey, Jerry,
Uh-huh.
and you're not, just to be clear, you're not criticizing people that appreciate America and appreciate living in this country. It's more identity being wrapped up in that, and then marrying Jesus with nationalism or deep loyalty to country rather than loyalty being in Jesus. Is that your point, or the thing you're
Yeah.
speaking to about that example about?
I think about Daniel, right? So if you know the story of Daniel, Melissa mentioned this. So he goes to live in Babylon, that has done a pretty good job of subduing most of the known world at that time. And the pagan, they've done it in the name of their pagan gods. And Daniel and some of his friends are invited into the upper echelons of government. And there's some things that they're not willing to do because their allegiance belongs to God, but there's some ways that they're willing to serve the system. And Jeremiah would even say, okay, you ended up in Babylon. Find a way to bless the city. Find a way to do good. Right? I mean, there's a navigation that there are no necessarily easy answers for. So Peter would say, when we think about who we are in regards to the country that we live in, no matter what country it is, we are what? We are aliens. We are foreigners. Or the Hebrew writer would say, you're looking forward to a different citizenship. You're not citizenships. Your citizenship doesn't belong here. It belongs in a city that is to come, right? So you have that kind of tension in Scripture, don't you? That where your supreme allegiance is to. And then so you're left to sort of navigate. How do I live as somebody of faith in a way that blesses my community in the way that stands for what is right, but never betrays my ultimate allegiance. And those are not easy things to work out. Those are not easy things to work out. Just think about this election, just the idea of whether to vote or not. You know, you can argue that, oh, I'm a citizen of the kingdom of heaven. I'm not even going to participate in this whole thing. Because this is, you know, that could, right? And some people, well, that's not okay. But the other thing you could argue, process here. And a democracy in this world is a good and beautiful thing. And by me participating in the election, you know, I'm participating in a place where a light's shining. Even if I have to write in my dad, right? But participating might be a good thing. You know what, right? Churchill, that's what he said, right? Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. So it could be a good thing. How do you navigate that? I am not going to give you specific answers because I'm still trying. Gray and I had a discussion about that, you know, with the election. Like, how do we navigate this as a follower of Jesus? What do we do? Who do we vote for? Do we vote? There's a whole. So think about this. Think about what it must have been like to live in a place like Thyatira or Ephesus, where everybody in town, every item that's sold, all the meat at the market, it's all blessing the god Nero. And to even get an opportunity to trade at the port, you got to have a stamp that says you bowed the knee. I mean, that was a tough situation. Now, how did these people think about getting involved in their local politics? How did they think about when the community gathered to make decisions or to voice their opinions? Did they have a part in that? Did they stay out because they weren't welcomed? Were they afraid to be a part of it? You know, what was that world like? How hard was it to navigate? What about if they're going to take your life because you won't bow to God Nero? Do you think, you know, maybe I ought to just say I'll bow to Nero and cross my fingers behind my back? Because it'd be a whole lot better for my wife and kids to hang around for a while. Maybe you could rationalize that. You think you could do that? And then when you think about that, you think, well, what do I rationalize now when it comes to allegiance? It's just hard. And John is not making it easy. He's got a pretty clear, solid line. You can only have one allegiance. Now, under that allegiance, you could work for the blessing of your community, but you only have one clear allegiance. Can you have multiple allegiances? That's a good question.
I see spiritual allegiance and allegiance to the country or whatever. It's two different things. They're not synonymous, in my opinion. That's why I can pledge allegiance to the flag.
Can't hear Walt.
Walt was talking about the Pledge of Allegiance and the allegiance to the country and to God. Or you would say they're non-competitive?
Right, I'd say they're two different things. My allegiance spiritually is to God and will always be. But I can still pledge allegiance to the flag or to pledge my support of the country. I don't see this as the same or contradictory to each other.
Could you ever imagine them being competitive?
I could, yeah, if the country goes the wrong way, for sure. The country demands things that are contrary to God's will, for sure.
So you have an ultimate allegiance. Okay.
Jerry, maybe I've oversimplified this whole
topic in my own mind. But just to use one example, money, but I think it applies to nationalism, I think it applies to beauty, I think it applies to education, I think it applies to everything. Pursuing an income, okay, is not a bad thing. It's when I cross the line and I buy into the idea the culture tries to lay on me that if you achieve money, then you're going to achieve happiness, you're going to have peace, you're going to have security. Okay? You're going to have those things because you achieve. And that applies to nationalism, it can apply to, I said beauty, everything, okay? But when you cross the line from pursuing it, okay, to believing that that's what it is that's going to give you security, now you've crossed into the domain of God. Because only He can give us those things. And when we depend on something else, that's become our idol.
So that, you know, if you take that back into the first century, that becomes a real serious thing for them, because it ultimately becomes very clear that they're going to lose their head for that allegiance.
Well, that's the ultimate. But even you know, those cities there in Asia Minor, they understood that if they worshiped the emperor, okay, then that was going to give them security. Right? That was going to give them peace. Right? That was going to give them the things that God owns. Okay? Even if it didn't come to death.
Yeah, that was a lot of pressure. So, you know, we'll continue. I mean, John's going to give us a lot of other icons and indexes and symbols as we go forward to sort of reflect back on our lives. I think what I don't want this to be is a suspicion or an idea like a dualism that contrasts what it means to be spiritual and what it means to live in the world. That's not what he's doing. This is a real world challenge to navigate. But I do think he's talking about reverence, what you truly revere, what you truly awe, where your heart belongs, those kinds of, I think that's close to what you were saying.
What you trust in.
What you place your security and your trust in. And I do think that we all can identify places in our own society, as much as we love our democracy, as much as we cherish a lot of the blessings we have, we can identify things that challenge, right, that challenge that in different ways. So, you know, think this week, as you just kind of watch commercials on TV, or as you listen to political rhetoric, as you look at the way that power is exercised in the world, just kind of look for those kinds of indexes and symbols and icons that are out there. They can even be religious, right? They could even be Christian. Right? People can exercise power like that in churches.
I think we should probably give some consideration to the role that the cross plays in religious and secular society. I see many people wearing crosses and who advocate for lifestyle and decision making that I think is far removed from what Jesus would say. So the cross becomes an icon that is very much confusing in our society. No one really truly understands, unfortunately, I think, when we say the cross, what we're really advocating. And that, I think, Jerry, that's a symbol that clearly is one that we need to spend some time reflecting on what that really means to follow a crucified Savior, right? In a world that is, how would we say it, enamored with all the things we just mentioned tonight. The cross doesn't fit very well in that particular paradigm.
It's good. So, you know, but maybe a way to think is, you know, how have you seen even the world? I mean, there was a time when Christendom and being a Christian was mainstream. our society, wasn't there? There was a time in which people were proud to say they went to church. There's a time in which going to church made you part of the establishment. And you could go to a big downtown church, right? First Pres, First Methodist, First Baptist. I'm sure there was a Church of Christ down there somewhere too. You know, and that puts you in, right? That did. Well, that's not the situation in the first century, and it's becoming less and less so in our culture, isn't it? But so how has the world taken our symbols when we, when we were there in the halls of power? What did they take from us and sort of make blasphemous?
Well, the country anyway used to acknowledge or whatever how important Christian views were. I think just the fact that stores were not open on Sundays, and just lots of things as far as socially went. I don't know, just things of that nature. People. I don't know, just
Chick-fil-A saying
that kind of stuff. I mean, everything just kind of shut down on Sundays because they knew. Everybody knew that was a day of rest for people, and anyway, that's.
Okay, thank you. What we'll do is we'll look at Revelation 12. Look at Revelation 12, 18 to 13:10. If you could write that down. We're not going to read all of it, but if you could read that passage, it's not a long passage. It's Revelation 12, 18 through 13:10. And so we'll get some exciting stuff. You get to take a look at the beast. You want to look at the beast next week? We're going to look at the beast next week. The underneath paintings of the beast.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Thank you. 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
You got 2 weeks to read it. Thanks. Hey, have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you're out of town Sunday. And just hope you have a good time with family. Yeah.